Well, the 23-24 championship season is well and truly in full flow now. We are back today for matchday 4 score predictions as we run through all 12 fixtures this weekend and tell you what we think the score's going to be. Hopefully it goes as successfully as last weekend where a lot of us, including myself, picked up good scores. And let's start by having a quick recap of them before we look ahead to this weekend's action. So first of all, it was 14 points for me across this weekend. 3 perfect scores as you can see, and I might have only predicted 2 championships favourite scorelines, but I did get them both right. Leeds v West Brom and Middlesbrough Huddersfield both finished in a 1-1 draw, and I also got Preston's 1-0 win at Sheffield Wednesday to make it 3 perfect scores with 5 other correct outcomes. Now 14 points is a pretty good score, but there were a few of you who did very well as well. 2 of you got a better score than me, and 1 deserves a special mention. That's one of our regulars, Steve, who managed to pick up 13 points with 3 perfect scores, and on any other match day would have beat me. But the top 2 who did manage to do so, Stuart Hunter, 16 points with 4 perfect scores, and Akshay, top of the pile, 17 points with 4 perfect scores. Well done to both of you. Lots of people got Leeds West Brom right this week as well, which I found quite interesting. But that's match day 3, look back at. Let's get ahead to the action this weekend. Match day 4 starts on Friday night, and it's with a repeat of the opening day of the previous season. Hull City versus Bristol City, a game I remember well from Seri scoring a late stoppage time winner in a 22-23 campaign. And this time, Hull come into it off the back of a 2-1 win away from home. A good result for them at Blackburn, and to be fair, that was one of the games that fooled a lot of people last weekend. And Bristol City's was as well, in fairness, both decided by red cards. Hull took advantage despite going 1-0 down against 10 men. Aaron Connolly popped up with a late brace and is starting to look a goal scorer. And overall, you can't really argue they deserve to win it, albeit they made hard work against 10 men. For Bristol City, I'm not sure they can pin as much blame on the red card. They were already 1-0 down when Rob Dickie got sent off, but a late second, of course, compounded the misery. It was a big win for Birmingham, but Bristol City didn't manage a shot on target at home. 65% of the ball, they created one very good chance, but when you look at their season so far, it has been a case of toothlessness up front. They got that late winner from the long throw at Millwall and got a 1-1 draw at home to Preston, but there's not been goals galore in that team, you have to say that. So that's something that Bristol City are going to need to improve on. For Hull City, it's been a pretty decent start to the season, I'd say, and they'll be looking to build on that this weekend. They've been goals galore, which was a bit unlike them last season, but I am going to back them to win this one, and I'm going to go for a little bit of a return to what we saw last year. I'm going to go for Hull to win by 1-0 because the Friday night games don't always offer a lot of goals, and given Bristol City's record this season and the fact Hull are doing all right, I'm going to go for it to be a boring 1-0 win, but Hull City won't care if they get another 3 points. Let's move on to the 10 3 p.m. kickoffs on Saturday, and we start with the side that won at Bristol City as Birmingham City host Plymouth Argyle. Plymouth, of course, the late heartbreak against Southampton, a 94th minute winner there. But again, probably encouraging signs for Plymouth. They didn't create many great chances, they only had a couple of shots on target, but they have been a side who have shown versatility. They've been able to give up the ball at times and play on the counter. They've also, though, shown that more dominant, ruthless edge, which we saw in part against Huddersfield and we saw a lot last season. So we are seeing a mix of styles from Plymouth and they've been competitive in every game. For Birmingham, it's been a very good start to the season. Yes, that 1-1 draw away at Swansea was courtesy of a big defensive error, but a 1-0 at home to Leeds, a 2-0 against Bristol City on the road. They're very solid defensively, and it's what John Eustace built a lot of their qualities on last season, particularly away from home. They managed to pick up points by frustrating a lot of teams, and this season, I don't think we're going to see too much different. There's definitely a lot of progress at Birmingham. They're a lot happier off the pitch at the moment, of course. But given how competitive Plymouth have been, and given where I expect both of these sides to be, I have had to sit on the fence with this one, I'm afraid. I've gone for quite a lot of goals this weekend, despite these first 2 predictions. I'm going for a Championship's favourite scoreline of 1-1. Wouldn't shock me if Birmingham do keep a clean sheet, but 1-0 or 1-1 were the 2 predictions, and you've got to get the Championship's favourite scoreline if there's ever a doubt. Let's move on to the second 3 p.m. kickoff, which is 2 sides most would probably expect to be down there this year, and the early form has suggested nothing different. It is Cardiff City versus Sheffield Wednesday. For Cardiff, a pretty poor start to the season. Most games have been close, and to be fair, they've played away at relegated Leeds and Leicester already, so they've got two of the toughest games out the way. But only 1 point. Aaron Ramsey scoring an absolute rocket at Leicester, great to see. But they're still a little bit shaky defensively. Against Leeds, they could have let in loads. Against QPR, they were very suspect. And a late red card in this game, which, let's be fair, Leicester were the better side in, is not going to be particularly helpful. However, Cardiff did create a couple of good chances on the counter, and if they can take them, you never know. Are home to a Sheffield Wednesday side who are rock bottom with no points this year. They played at home to Preston, and to be honest, it didn't look that inspiring. It was a bit better defensively than what we saw at Hull. Not many chances for either side, but if we're being honest, Sheffield Wednesday didn't do enough to win the game. And at home to sides that finished in the middle of the table last year, that's where they've got to start getting their results. So for Sheffield Wednesday, a very disappointing day. I know Preston didn't create much, but their chances were very good ones. In the end, it was probably just about a fair result. So it is a bit of a tricky game to predict this. Of course, Sheffield Wednesday doing a lot of their work later in a transfer window because of the Darren Moore saga and the playoffs and all of that. So they're about a month behind, which means we might not see the best of them until after the international break. But away to Cardiff is one of those games you look at the start of the season and think you probably can't afford to lose. So for Sheffield Wednesday, do they go out and try and get a point, try and get a result, get off the mark at the very least? I don't think it's going to be enough. Cardiff, as much as they're not great at the back, they've got too much firepower while their attacking stars are fit. And if they take the chances they've created in the Leicester game or the QPR game, then for me it could be a home win. And I'm going to go for them to edge it, but not with a clean sheet, by 2-1. Let's move on to a game that provides a lot of nostalgia for me. It's two sides that were in the Championship playoffs last year, the two sides that Luton beat to get to the Premier League. And it's also the game that produced the last goal I saw before lockdown in 2020. It's Coventry City versus Sunderland. To give you a mark of how far these sides have come, that game was in League One. And now both sides looking to back up a Championship playoff place. For Coventry, as we expected, they've started well. A decent draw away at Swansea after a very good win at home to Borough. And even a Leicester game they were unfortunate to lose. So while it's going to take a little while for them to get up to their attacking speed, with Hamer and Gyökeres as 2 stars going, we know that Mark Robins will do a good job. They've got good people in charge of recruitment, and you always trust them to do well. I mean, Haji Wright's looking a good signing already, and Coventry are really starting to impress. For Sunderland, it wasn't a vintage performance, but it was a crucial win against Rotherham. Of course, Joby Bellingham popped up with a brace, and then his brother did the same later for Real Madrid. A lovely moment and bit of history for the family, but crucially, it's 3 points on the board. It wasn't the best display in the world, and we've seen Rotherham in other away games this season, like at Stoke, where they got played off the park. And Sunderland did dominate the ball. They did create good chances and probably could have had a third, but it probably wasn't quite what we'd expect to see from a free-flowing Sunderland that we saw at times last year. Again, it's going to take a little while for them to get up to speed. They've been quite slow in their transfer work this summer, and I hope they're going to have a big finish so they can compete again. For this game, though, I just feel off the two this season, Coventry look in a better position, and I hope both sides do well. They both deserve to be in the playoffs last year, and have both largely been written off this season due to some of the big names coming into the league. But I feel that Coventry at the moment are just a bit further ahead, look a bit more cohesive, and as a result, I'm going to go for them to win pretty comfortably by 2-0 on this occasion. Let's move on to Huddersfield Town versus Norwich City. Boy, oh boy, Norwich are looking good. I took a bit of stick for saying they might nick second spot this year, but so far the signs are very good. They were excellent against Millwall at the weekend. Bit frustrating they let in a late goal, but they were dominant. They created chances galore. We're starting to see that movement down the wide areas. Jack Stacey doing what he did for Luton many years ago. And Rose looking good. Sargent scoring goals. And I think this weekend, more than any game so far, we saw the value of Ashley Barnes, which we sort of highlighted as a little masterstroke signing. And my word, did he have an impact in that game. A really good start for them, unbeaten of course, and if it wasn't for that late goal against Southampton, it would have been the perfect start. For Huddersfield, not quite so eventful, but they did, as we predicted, get off the mark against Middlesbrough. Narrow defeat against Leicester and a defeat against Plymouth, but they bounced back with a 1-1 draw at the Riverside. It was a game that was pretty even, to be honest. I know Borough had more of the ball, they had more of the better chances, but Huddersfield did create plenty on the counter and were a constant threat. So they'll be pleased to pick up the point, maybe a bit worried about the lack of goal threat because of course it was an own goal they relied on in that game. But this one, I just see it the same as the last game. There's one team that are clearly in a better position, have clearly got more of their transfer work done and are more prepared. And it's one of the things we highlighted with Norwich. They got a lot of their key transfer work done early. They've had the whole pre-season there and they're reaping the rewards. Of course, the thing to follow is going to be a league clean sheet. I don't think that's coming this weekend, but I do think they'll have far too much going forward for Huddersfield. So I'm going to go for another comfortable win, this time 3-1 for the visitors. Let's move on to a cracker of a game down at Portman Road. It is Ipswich Town versus Leeds United. Two divisions separated these teams last year, but at the start of this season, it is Ipswich who are flying. Of course, another win this time away at QPR. I think if you look at it, a 1-0 away win, you would have said, oh, we probably expected that at the start of the day. Some of the chances QPR had missed were unbelievable. If we're being honest, on most other days, they would have got a result. They probably would have got a draw. But Ipswich were backs to the wall. They were throwing themselves at everything. And while it wasn't one of their vintage performances like we saw at home to Stoke, it was a gutsy performance and they got the result. Of course, on another day, that may not have happened, but it preserves their unbeaten start and their perfect start at the moment. For Leeds, a 1-1 draw at home to West Brom, a lot of us predicted that. They're not quite flowing yet, and to be fair to Daniel Farke, they're losing more players than any of us could have imagined. Jack Harrison off since we recorded the last one as well. There are so many players on the move, and it's very difficult to build a squad when you have no idea what players are going to be there. And we're sort of seeing the hangover, even now with Tyler Adams as well, of all these little relegation release clauses that Victor Orta put in. And of course, he's out of the club now and they will move forward. But it's probably going to take Leeds a little longer to get up to speed than we anticipated, as they're going to have to build a bit more of a squad than Daniel Farke probably imagined. He is traditionally a slow starter anyway, so we're not going to worry too much. But it was a good performance. Of course, the frailty was another poor goal conceded. They did play a lot better than the previous week and they created a lot more leads, but they've got to stop letting in silly goals and they've got to start finding clean sheets. In the end, it was a point for them. It wasn't a bad result. But again, Ipswich are in the better position of the two. And while we got fooled on match day 2, most of the predictions this season, the side that is better prepared and got more of its transfer work done early has generally been the winner. So as a result, I'm going to go for Ipswich to nick it. I do think they'll concede a goal at home to Leeds, but I'm going to go for 2-1 Ipswich Town to continue their perfect start. Let's move on to the den, and it's Millwall versus Stoke City. Millwall were very disappointing at Norwich, and it's not been a good start to the season. Whereas for Stoke, well, a very good 1-0 home win against Watford. The one problem I've got for this game is that Stoke look really poor on the road to Ipswich. They've been very good in the 2 home games, and Vidigal looks like one of the signings of the summer. I said it from the very start. But this game is very tricky to predict because they didn't create an awful lot. Stoke, they've been clinical, they've been ruthless at times this season. But Millwall traditionally at home are so good. They had that really disappointing performance against Bristol City where they let in a late goal from a long throw. And defensively, they were really poor against Norwich. But on the opening day, they were brilliant against Borough. So Millwall almost becoming a bit hard to predict, which is not what we want. They're usually one of the home bankers in the league. But Stoke away from home, I just can't trust to get the win. On any other day, I would go for a Millwall win, and I really wouldn't be shocked if they win this. I'm going to have to sit on the fence with a Championship's favourite scoreline. I'm going to go for 1-1, just because there's so much inconsistent evidence for both teams. Let's move on to Preston North End versus Swansea. Preston probably pretty happy with their start to the season. 2 successive wins after their draw at Bristol City. It was a 1-0 at Sheffield Wednesday. They created a couple of good chances and it was very similar to their games at the start of last season, except they're finding goals this time. They managed to pop up with 1 at Sheffield Wednesday. They obviously popped up with 2 against Sunderland, and Will Keane has made a bit of an impact, albeit there was a bit of a dodgy dive in that game. And you've got to be fair to them, defensively they're fairly robust, which is always going to keep them midway or above in a championship. Let's hope they can add that firepower for their sake, because if they do, they're definitely going to be playoff challengers. For Swansea, a pretty good 1-1 draw at home to Coventry. Of course, they had that defensive display at West Brom, which wasn't great, but 2 1-0 draws at home against decent sides. I don't think they'll be devastated with a start to the year. Jerry Yates is starting to look really promising for them. Good summer signing, improving his championship quality. And albeit it wasn't one of the best games of the weekend against Coventry, they did create the best chance of the game. And, interestingly for Swansea, based on what we saw under Russell Martin, showed a different style, having a lot less of the ball sitting back and hitting on a counter, which is something that Swansea are going to have to adapt to because they've never had a plan B under Russell Martin. And to be fair, even before that, under Potter and Cooper, was a very similar style of play. So Michael Duff adding a little bit more variety to their game, and I think in the long term that could be helpful for them. However, given their start to the season and the fact they are finding a few more goals now as well, I am going to go for Preston to just nick this. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if this ended up being a Championship's favourite scoreline. But I've gone for the home side to edge it. I'm starting a flurry of goals towards the end of this match day. I'm going 2-1 for Preston. As we move on to a game between sides expected to be at very different ends of the table, a lot of people have predicted these teams to be first and 24th. It is Rotherham United versus Leicester City. Leicester continue their unconvincing yet perfect start with a 2-1 win against Cardiff City. On another day, the result might have been different again. If they keep saying that and winning, they're not going to care. They've won every game by a goal. They were fortunate against Coventry. They were a bit suspect defensively at times against Cardiff. But a 92nd minute winner, followed by the red card for Cardiff. Leicester will be very happy with that. For Rotherham, it was a 2-1 defeat away at Sunderland and a better performance on the road than what we saw at Stoke. But you've got to be fair with Rotherham. They've got to be better defensively. It's something we saw a few times away from home last year, but it is becoming a regular occurrence in their game. 8 goals conceded in 3 matches. They've let in 2 or more in every single one. And you can't score 3 goals to win a game every single week. So with Leicester being pretty efficient and good at the back so far this year, with Rotherham being incredibly leaky, I'm going to go for Leicester to nick it. And as they've won every game by 1 goal, I'm going to go for 2-1 to the visitors. Let's move on to what I assume will be the home banker of the weekend for many. It is Southampton versus QPR. 2 results this weekend for these sides that probably didn't tell the full story. Southampton nicked a 94th minute winner away at Plymouth in a game that was relatively even for the most part. Of course, Russell Martin's side had more of the ball, they had more shots on goal, and they did have more shots on target. But it was a competitive game, and a late winner just felt cruel on Plymouth, albeit maybe Southampton just edged the game. For QPR, I said it earlier on, how did they not score against Ipswich? You look at the stats and think, oh yeah, that was just a comfortable 1-0 away win. I urge you to watch the highlights. Some of the chances QPR missed where they didn't get a shot away, it got cleared off the line or it didn't go in. Miraculous. Ilias Chair nearly scored a wonder goal from halfway, and it was actually a really decent QPR performance. They showed counter-attacking quality and pace. They showed defensive spirit, which they haven't always had in recent times. And I felt like you were starting to see a Gareth Ainsworth side, but with that little bit of quality you see in that QPR team. As players get fitter, they will get better. But in defeat, I think it was probably a very encouraging QPR performance. What we did see, though, in contrast to that, was an awful performance away at Watford. And against Cardiff, whilst they did get the win, they got carved open a bit. So while I feel QPR might be quite strong at home under Gareth Ainsworth, away from home, the evidence suggests they're going to be very open. And Southampton, well, they've been goals galore at both ends so far this year. The last home game was a 4-4 draw. So I'm going to go for them to score 4 again this time. I don't often do this in championship predictions. I'm going to go for Southampton to win by 4-1. I just feel that QPR on the road, as people coming up to fitness, it might not be the best day for them. But there were some very encouraging signs at home last week. The final game on Saturday afternoon is West Bromwich Albion versus Middlesbrough. The poor start continues for Borough, who were held 1-1 by Huddersfield. For West Brom, the same result and outcome at Leeds, but they'll probably be quite happy with that given the way the game went. There's no doubt they were second best for the most part, but they picked up 4 points in the last 2 games. And while they get going, and while they try and find that defensive security we're so used to seeing from Carlos Corberán's teams, they'll be happy to just be picking up points. For Borough, it's got to turn at some point, but is this going to be the week? It's not looking like it at the moment. Big players leaving the club, little bit of churn, and it's taking a while to get settled. And of course, they have lost a lot of that goal threat from last year. 2 poor performances in a row. I do wonder if it's going to take a bit of time. Everyone had Borough up with the 3 relegated sides as the favourites this year, but I always felt it was going to be a later dash for the playoffs. The slow start, I feel, will continue this weekend. Carlos Corberán just finds a way at home, as the Swansea game showed. And I think they're going to nick this game. I wouldn't trust either team to keep a clean sheet at the minute. So I'm going to go for 2-1 for West Bromwich Albion. And the final game on Sunday lunchtime is Watford versus Blackburn Rovers. Blackburn were disappointing against Hull, but how much can you read into a game where they played 75 minutes with 10 men? Sam Gallagher did put them ahead, and it looked like briefly they might nick one with 10v11, but of course they were pegged back by that Aaron Connolly double. For Watford, very much a different story, isn't it? Blackburn's games have been goals galore at both ends. Watford games have been, well, very defensively solid. One of only 3 teams to let in just 1 goal this year, but that one was a crucial one at Stoke in a 1-0 defeat. And what we've seen against Plymouth and against Stoke City is that when a side sets up relatively resolute, lets Watford have a bit more of the ball and sits behind it, Watford can't really create many clear-cut chances. Now, when they're playing against slower, more open sides like QPR, they're obviously proving they've got quality to score goals, but when they've got to break teams down, are they able to find that form? The good news for them is Blackburn's defensive record and performances this season suggest they'll be a bit more open than that. What I do worry about for the Watford point of view, though, is they're probably coming up against a better attack than the 3 teams they've played this year. Stoke may dispute that based on the Rotherham game, but for me, I'm going to go with confidence and say this game might be a bit of a thriller. We saw the last Sunday game was pretty entertaining, and both of these sides will be looking for a result. They're both 2 without a win. They both need to get moving. You know, if you're a Watford manager, in all seriousness, you've gone out the cup and you've picked up 1 point in 2 league games. You're not far from being under pressure. So I think both teams will be a bit more aggressive in this game. And I'm going to go for a thrilling draw to finish. 2 goals apiece between Watford and Blackburn. So let's have a quick recap of what I've just predicted, and I have gone largely for goals galore this weekend. I've gone slow at the start with a couple of low-scoring games, but the big ones come towards the end as a 4-1 win for Southampton against QPR, a 3-1 win for Norwich away at Huddersfield, and in the final game of the match day, Watford v Blackburn, a 2-2 entertaining draw on TV on Sunday. But those are just my predictions for matchday 4. Do you agree or disagree with them? Let me know in the comments down below. As always, please do continue to get involved in your numbers and give us your score predictions for this weekend. If you beat my score or get a great one, you will get a shout out in a recap at the start of the next episode. In the meantime though, if you did enjoy this video, please do chuck a thumbs up on it. If you haven't already, make sure you check out the Premier League predictions with the Luton Chelsea preview up in the eye above. League One Shorts predictions will be coming tomorrow, so get involved with those too. And I'm going to 3 live games this weekend at different levels of the game, so you'll be able to get plenty of matchday action here on the Honest Football Podcast. Subscribe and turn that notification bell on. Stay up to date with all of that. And I'll see you back here next time for matchday 5, the final one before the international break.